Hi, Kenneth.
Yes, hi. Nice to meet you.
Hi, I'm Chelsea. I'm a social worker here. Have a seat. So you go by Kenny, Kenneth?
I actually go by KC, my initials.
Any particular reason?
Well, my mom actually wanted to name me Casey, like C-A-S-E-Y. My dad was like, no, he has to be the fourth Kenneth. And then they compromised and came up with KC, which works out because 4 Kens at a holiday party is very confusing.
Fair enough. So the purpose of this first meeting, excuse me, is for me to get a little bit more familiar with your story, what's going on, and the plan will be we're kind of going to work through that, set some goals, and figure out how to accomplish them.
Okay.
Fair enough? Is it okay if we keep going with the session? Okay. So before we start, I just want to let you know that we take privacy very seriously, and confidentiality is very important to us. So anything that is said here stays here.
That's good to know.
So in your own words, can you tell me a little bit about what's going on?
Yeah. I don't know, I've just kind of felt off over the last couple months. Really since my parents split up. They split up back in October, and it was it's kind of a shock, to be honest.
Okay. What were things like when that happened?
Well, it wasn't really anything that we saw coming. Like me and my sister, meaning we, my parents argued a lot whenever we were kids, but that was just something that seemed normal enough. I think the weirdest part is that it happened when I was 22 versus happening when I was like 12, when it seemed like all my other friends' parents were splitting up or getting divorced. So it just kind of felt weird, like it was just something different. We found out after like one of Bethany's football games, which is where me and my sister both go to college. Like my parents both came. I remember thinking it was like kind of weird that they came in 2 different cars since we live about 45 minutes away. Mm-hmm. But then again, I was like, oh, if they came from work, it might be one thing. And then I immediately dismissed that because it was a Saturday. And then I just remember, like, after the game, like, we went out to eat. They didn't really say a whole lot to each other. And then whenever, like, we got back to campus, we all went to, like, my dorm room. We were just sitting there. And things just felt tense. You know what I mean? And then, like, my mom led into it and said something to the effect of, there's something we gotta tell you guys. And my first thought was, I'm getting a little brother. And then I was like, that can't work. My dad had a vasectomy at, like, the day my sister was born. So then my mind just started racing. And they said that, like, they had split up, like, a week before that and just didn't tell us yet. They said they wanted to tell us in person. I just remember kind of being, like, in shock for what felt like a couple hours, but it was probably more like 10 minutes. I can't really remember a whole lot of what was said between them breaking that news to us and then them leaving. What I remember the most is afterwards I drove my little sister back to her dorm room and just kind of sitting in the car in the dark trying to console her the best that I could because she was crying in the passenger seat. She was always like when we were kids and they would argue, she would always like kind of take it on herself like it was her fault. So I was trying to like assure her that this was on them, it was nothing that we had done, trying to convince her that everything was going to work out the way it was supposed to. Like I said, that's the most vivid part of the whole thing. Just staring at the brick building that she lived in and trying to think of a way to make her feel better about this situation that I knew that she was so torn up over. And I just remember feeling like it wasn't affecting me nearly the same way that it was affecting her, and trying to figure out like why that was. And it still kind of confuses me why it didn't seem to have the same impact on me. And then I get in my own head and I think about, like, did I not care? Was it not that as much of a shock to me as it should have been? I don't know. It was definitely a lot. Like a lot to take in, a lot to deal with. And then even like my girlfriend at the time trying to make it all about her is what it seemed like, because I wasn't ready to tell anyone what had happened. I hadn't processed it. I hadn't even fully accepted it yet. But she could tell that there was something like different about me. And she was very adamant, telling me like, just tell me what's wrong, just tell me what's wrong. And I was just like, I'm not ready to tell you what's wrong. But then she tried to turn it about her and be like, oh, you don't trust me. How can we have been together this long? You don't trust me enough to tell me what's wrong. And I just remember that, like, just kind of putting a bad taste in my mouth and making me feel like it was more important for her to know than it was for me to deal with.
Well, I mean, it sounds like it's been really tough for you and your family.
Mm-hmm.
Been a rough couple of months. So, what you're kind of saying is you're feeling off, your parents have split, you're still kind of feeling off, but you're not really sure why.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be the most pressing issue.
Yeah.
How old is your sister?
She is 18.
And it sounds like you kind of been trying to take on some responsibility and taking care of her and making sure that she's okay.
Mm-hmm. That's how it's always been.
Okay. Do you think that in all of this, that what have you done to kind of try to take care of your own self?
Nothing really. I just tried to go on about my day that I would normally.
Have you talked to any of your friends? Anyone else that's kind of been through this?
No, actually, you are the third person that I've said this out loud to.
I'm sure it's a little overwhelming, kind of holding all those feelings in.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you think that could be part of why you're still feeling a little off?
Yeah, that's definitely not like an unlikely situation. But it's also something that I've done for my whole life, and it's never really seemed to be like this.
What do you mean this is something you've been doing your whole life?
I don't know. I've always just kind of taken I guess like the path of being the protector. Like, when my parents would fight, I would try and keep my little sister calm. Like back when I was a kid, my grandfather died when I was 8. I did the same thing with like my sister and my cousin, and made sure that they were okay before I would take any time for myself. And that was even a delayed effect back then. I remember like my grandfather died in August when I was 8, and it took me until probably like the next summer before I felt the full effects of it. I remember riding in our car on the way back from vacation, and just started crying and not realizing why.
So you tend to internalize your feelings and
100%.
Have you ever considered any like self-care techniques, things of that nature?
What do you mean by that?
Ways that, one, you kind of like get in touch with yourself to kind of see how you're feeling, but then two, just like taking some time to only worry about you, to only do things you like to do things that make you feel good.
I'd like to say yes, but the answer is probably closer to no. I mean, maybe sometimes I've done that just on accident. But I feel like I'm too busy all the time to take any time, which is probably why I burn myself out after like 4 months and take like a 15-hour nap.
That seems very plausible. Do you think that's something that you might be interested in?
Anything to alleviate the stress that I feel, absolutely.
Okay. So one of the things that we like to do is we like to set these things called SMART goals. Specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and timely.
Mm-hmm.
So based on this kind of want to maybe try some self-care, I think before our next session, you could write down 3 self-care techniques or practices that you find might be enjoyable and that you'd like to try.
Okay.
You think?
Do they have to be very time-consuming? Because I have like finals and stuff coming up.
Not at all. You can do things such as meditations or yoga, or if you enjoy playing sports, you could play sports and that could count. Anything that helps you kind of just feel happy and joyful.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I would want to do for sure.
Okay. So then maybe we could plan to have that accomplished before our next session. And you could bring those 3 ideas back and we can talk about those some more.
Sounds reasonable.
Okay. Let's plan on meeting next Wednesday at the same time, and we'll kind of go over the rest of that.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks, Kenny. Casey, my apologies. I'm glad you were able to come in today.
Thank
See you
you
next week.
See you next week.